good to be with you. It's really good to be with you. Welcome. I am Julia Nielsen. I am the director of the Levin Community Land and Housing Coalition. It is good to be with you tonight. Welcome to all core teams. As you're arriving, I invite you to put your name and your core team in the chat. And if you have a celebration tonight or from the last few months, what's your team been up to? Go ahead and put something in the chat right now. We can see who's in the room. I know I'm going to say on behalf of Aloha United Methodist Church, they opened their Safe Rest Village today after a couple of years of deep organizing and intensive work. So congratulations to Aloha UMC, an amazing accomplishment, an amazing accomplishment. Anybody else have something that they want to celebrate their team having done? Go ahead and put that in the chat before we get going. We have tonight both our St. Andrews core team and our East County core teams in person together, not on the screen separately. So we will be cheering them on. They'll be separate from us doing one-to-ones together. And also some of our East County folks are off speaking truth to power with Senator Jama in East County tonight, speaking about the needs of our asylum seeker core team and our asylum seeker neighbors, as well as faith communities building affordable housing. So please keep them in mind as we are moving tonight, knowing that they are doing the organizing that we are talking about right now. Thanks, Chris. Showers for the unhoused opened at First UU. That big shower project is a huge deal. Congratulations to First Unitarian Universalist Church. All right. It's such a pleasure. We are in our 6th of 9 months together. Thank you for being here. Remember that we, the Land and Housing Coalition, is a part of a larger movement home, the Sacred Organizing House, where we bring together under one roof, as you will, teams of people of faith and courageous love committed to building a multi-faith, multiracial, and multi-generational movement for justice in Oregon, united by the practices, the shared practices of sacred organizing. Tonight, we are going to walk through the sacred organizing spiral together. And as we do that, we are still in the unveiling season. I want you all to understand, though, that we're kind of in a bridge time between unveiling and the work of action. So you see that we have sacred encounter that we've been in, sacred unveiling, and then sacred action comes later, and we are here. Now, I want to be clear, we have so many things that we can be doing. Tonight, we're going to walk through that sacred unveiling portion as we learn about a really essential tool in the community organizing toolbox called community house meetings. The famous organizer Fred Ross once said, "The house meeting is the best way of doing a very, very thorough, systematic job in a blazing way. Every organizer becomes a social arsonist, able to set people on fire to make change in their communities." That's us. That's us. That's what we're going to do. So what's a house meeting, though? That's the question, right? We want to set people's hearts on fire. How do we do that? So I want to talk through what a house meeting is so that we can actually have that conversation. So what's a house meeting? I want you to think of all of the one-to-one conversations that you've had over the last 6 months. And at this point, some of your teams have had as many as 50 meetings. In each one-to-one, you've heard stories. You've heard what is making people's lives hard. You've heard their many self-interests. And you've probably started to get an intuition about what needs to change right now in your community. You're starting to see some connections. Maybe at first, it was just one connection between a couple of people. But then as you did more and more one-to-ones, a full map of connected problems and pressures is getting clearer and clearer. You start to see the stories. You've uncovered the real trouble in the community. You might even be starting to imagine a possible action or a solution. But I know that we can't move big problems like what we're identifying alone. So what do? We have all these individual stories. We start to host some house meetings. And that random collection of loosely related people, maybe only related through me or only through you, now becomes a powerful group that is connected to one another as well. And they now know that they have a shared problem. And we all know that a braid is stronger with more threads. There are shared threads. You are weaving those threads together. There are relationships, there are stories, and there is passion. So what happens is that house meetings make people feel less alone. They also make it clear to everyone who's there that the problem that they seem to have is not their fault, that they can do something about it. You look across the table or across the circle and see someone else who is also suffering from the same thing, and it is because of shared pressures. So house meetings they lead to shared action as well. So tonight, as we're learning about house meetings, instead of explaining how house meetings work beat by beat, we're actually going to have one. You have now been welcomed to the Levin Community Land and Housing February house meeting. You all are about to be inundated with the opportunity to participate in a house meeting hosted by us, and you have a theme. What's the theme? What connections have we heard that are why this group of people has been invited? Well, over and over, through many one-to-ones and core team conversations over a long period of time, we have heard a similar story. Congregations with land and congregations with resources have leaders with conflicting visions of the mission of the church related to that and those resources. Sometimes it's the council or the vestry or the clergy. Sometimes it's a group of powerful people within the church that don't have official committee assignments. But the congregations and the core teams run into dynamics that are slowing down, moving toward decisions about what to do. So we've heard this over and over again from so many of you. Sometimes it's internal conflict. Sometimes it's leadership throwing on the brakes. Maybe if you participate in a denomination, the structure is getting bossy and in your way, but the barriers are similar. People with passion, informed, organized core teams have found a way forward, and there's pressure not to do what the community has asked for, right? Some of you may have had this experience. I know you have. Now, I just want to say, your own house meetings, if you host them, can be about any topic that connects the folks you've listened to. It doesn't have to be about this one. This is just something that affects a lot of people in this particular room. Also, unlike this room, on the house meeting we're running tonight, most house meetings will only be 6 to 12 people, not 50 to 60. Okay? So just know that this is a little bit of a created container, but we are going to have a real house meeting. Between every section of our house meeting agenda tonight, as you're learning how to host one, we are going to step back, zoom out from the house meeting, and pause to talk about the agenda and why it's necessary and why we do it. So I want you to get your questions ready as you're participating. Why do we do that? Why is that happening? Every time you see me on the screen, we have zoomed out from the house meeting. All right. I am your narrator and your MC tonight. So if you see me, we are taking a step back to say, wait a second, why are we doing this? Okay. Are you ready to be a part of 11 Community Land and Housing house meeting? Thank you, Chris De La Cruz. Chris De La Cruz is excited. I see Story is excited. Nora is here and excited. All right. I'm going to turn it into a house meeting. I'm waving my magic wand. Welcome to the house meeting. We are so glad you are here. I want to make sure that we all know one another. Thank you for coming. But before we move on to our grounding tonight, we need to do a roll call. So I want to ask you, if you can, to just put in the chat your name and a couple of words about a time when you wanted to do something and someone tried to stop you. How did you respond? When you wanted to do something and someone tried to stop you. Don't be shy. I know that almost everybody in this room has tried to do something because you're all courageous people. I'll start. My name's Jules, and the last time somebody tried to stop me, I got really mad, and I did it anyway. That's what I did. Amy and Joel, Giuseppe, Yasmin, Funga, Clay, Vaughn, and Cheryl are in East County talking about this. Grace with La Casa Común said, I felt frustrated and powerlessness. Thanks, Grace. Yeah, I resonate with that. Allison, I get very frustrated. Nancy, someone objected and I acknowledged their concern and I was upset and powerless. Debbie and Creator and the Southeast PDX youth felt frustrated. I'm sensing a theme: frustration, anger. I started to wonder if they were right. Maybe I shouldn't do the thing. I felt very angry, disheartened. Friends, you are not alone. When people try to stop us from doing something we know is important, it's okay to be angry about it and then to act. So I want to ground us, invite us to get grounded in our time tonight as we enter into our house meeting to talk about what to do when people try to stop us. Grace, thank you for being willing to lead our grounding tonight.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our house meeting tonight. My name's Grace. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm from the Theophilus Land and Housing Corps team. And I am here tonight to invite you into the time that we have together. So I want you to kind of look at the screen here and notice maybe just one face of someone else who's here tonight. Maybe you know them, maybe they're a new face to you, but everybody who's here tonight is here because these issues surrounding land and housing and community, they matter deeply to us. And we're also here because somebody invited us in to be part of this conversation. I want us to just kind of think back to, I want you to think back to when you were first invited into this conversation about land and housing. And we can kind of call it like an invitation story. So how did that happen for you? Maybe it was a casual conversation and suddenly you realize that the person you're talking to also cares deeply about land and housing justice. Or maybe somebody sought you out and asked you to share your thoughts and your concerns. Or you maybe were the person who was seeking other people out to join you in organizing your community. My own invitation story is kind of a little bit of all of these things. I was invited into this conversation by someone in my own congregation who's really deeply invested in organizing for housing justice. And then in turn, I started inviting other people into this conversation as well so we could move forward together as a community. These kinds of invitations, these conversations, they moved me from a sense of despair and frustration, like many people are voicing in the chat, towards what feels like hope and even tangible steps forward. So I want everybody to just close their eyes. And I want you to think about your own invitation story. Maybe bring up in your mind the faces of the people who first connected with you around land and housing and community. Can you see their faces in your mind? Maybe some of them are also in this Zoom room right now. But how does it feel to find other people who are also passionate about these issues? Just take a minute with your eyes closed to kind of revel in that thought. How does it feel to find others who are also passionate about these issues? And if you feel comfortable, maybe type a word or a phrase in the chat that kind of describes that feeling. Seeing relief, feeling inspired, feeling trusted, connection, reconnection, motivation, feeling like home helps you feel alive. These are beautiful emotions, like I'm taking a breath of fresh air. Let's hold on to those emotions as we go forward into the night and know that we are surrounded by people who care deeply about the things that matter to us. Thank you for just taking some time to remember how you were first invited into this space, and welcome. And I'll hand it back to Jules.
We are leaving the house meeting for a moment. Thank you so much, Grace, for leading us in that grounding. I want to ask a question, and this is going to be a lot of participatory energy tonight, so I hope you're willing to play the game with me. Why do you think that we do a spiritual grounding in a house meeting? What is the purpose and function of starting the way that Grace just started us? You can just pop in or say something in the chat. Anything's acceptable. So we can feel connected with our community. Yes, thank you, Nora. Absolutely. Taking these folks that have not felt connected yet, perhaps, and getting them from getting here to being here together, to focus us. Yeah. Curious what it would have felt like if we had started without that. Moving us to a reflective space. Yeah. To go inside and to have shared values and the wisdom of our own bodies, right? To get us from here into our hearts, from our heads into our hearts. Without it, Diana says, it's just another meeting. We're starting from the same space. There's a lot of emotion and passion and feeling in the room. It can settle us and start us from a grounded place and slow us down. Wonderful. So remember that as you all are holding these, how important you feel those are and how important they're going to feel to the folks that you host. So important. All right, I'm going to zoom us back in, and we are back in the house meeting.
Hi, all. My name is Story, and I am a companion for the Oak Grove United Methodist Core team. Oak Grove is a church, just to give you a little demographic here. It's currently doing pretty well financially. It has a primarily older demographic in attendance, and geographically, it's very centrally located in Oak Grove, which reflects a lot of the role that it has historically played in the community. And behind the building, there's this unused plot of land, about 0.42 acres. And we recently discovered through some research from one of our core team members that it is zoned for 1 to 3 units of housing, which really excited the team when it learned this, when they were able to have this information brought forward. And Oak Grove as a whole has had this long history of community connection, from community-based and cooperative events like the Oak Grove Fest, Winter Blitz, which is done in community with the schools, developing a deep relationship with the high school that's just down the street from it, New Urban. Moving closer to those stories in our neighborhood have always been a part about what Oak Grove UMC has done. And in fact, one of the activating stories for our core team was when we connected to a counselor at New Urban High School. And she told us that in that time that we were talking to her, that she was working with 5 unaccompanied youth who had nowhere to go. The strategy was she texted people at the beginning of the day and hoped by the end of the school day, she had somewhere to take these youth. And when we heard that story, and when we looked at the fact that we already knew our congregation cared about New Urban, so it seemed like a really natural launching off point. And we looked at the fact that we have this land, we started to wonder, how can we bring those things together, that story of our community and our land, and make it a part of the bigger story of what was happening in our community. But even with all of that lining up right now, we're a little stuck with the clear next step for Oak Grove. The action we are inviting our congregation into is to imagine with us what would happen if we allowed this land to be a part of that bigger story and not just sit unused behind the church. To imagine it existing beyond just being property of Oak Grove United Methodist. But the barriers we're facing are in the congregation itself. There's this mindset of scarcity of resources and split self-interest. We know Oak Grove has a lot of people who do care about the community. We've seen it in action. We've seen it in many ways. But there's also this strong feeling there right now of we're really in a place where we need to focus on us. There's this belief among some of the folks in the congregation that a certain kind of adult ed or a certain kind of preaching or more fellowship is really where we need to put our priority and where we should focus. And they have kind of dubbed these kind of attempts as social justice attempts that we should just do on the side. And while we don't think that those things are bad, the fellowship, the adult ed, the problem that we're seeing is this, like, they're seeing their primary self-interest as this inward focus, and anything else they see as coming at expense of that. And if that is already the posture of some of the congregation right now, we're wondering if some of our work is going to just be met with suspicion right out of the gate. Will it be seen as something that will drain resources rather than something that actually is a really important extension of what they're already doing, to expand the story and vitality of Oak Grove and help it live more fully into its values? So we're left with this question of wondering, where do we put our energy next? It can take a long time for a church to transition around these kind of issues and to become stable. So do we wait for that? Or do we try and move those folks through a one-to-one process and a relational invitations? So that's kind of where we're stuck. Where should we go next? And as we move forward, I hope that y'all can help us be a part of this base that helps move the congregation, our community, us as a core team, so that we can help make this new story where everyone in our community can call it home.
Thanks, Story. Zoom out. Let's take a moment out of the house meeting for a second. What themes did you hear in Story's story? What are you noticing? Uncertainty. What are the various self-interests at play? What are the tensions? Difference of opinion. Yeah. Amongst the congregation and the leaders. Anxiety. Anxiety about what, East County? You have any specific things you heard? Scarcity, I'm seeing Diana. Worries about draining resources rather than extending what is existing. Not wanting to rock the status quo. A congregation or any group's tendency to focus inward. Difference of direction, concern about how to use resources. Excellent. So you heard the story. You heard what Story was trying to communicate. Now, why do you think that we led from the spiritual grounding right into what we would call an animating story in a house meeting? What's useful about Story's story to this room? Yeah, so it models a little bit of the kind of storytelling that you do in one-to-ones. Thanks, Allison. It does hook people in and it centers the conversation. It gives us something specific to work with, right? Yep, and it allows us to relate to one another. It might bring up things that are going on in our context. Hopefully it does, because what we do with an animating story is we choose one that we think will connect. We think will connect with the people that we've invited, so that people, that animating story is a good model, if you will, of the things we've been hearing in our wider community. So we want to choose a story that really helps us to see the problem. Yeah, Chris, it grounds the conversation in experience, not just abstract thoughts. Yeah. So I want you all to sit for a moment and think about what your core teams are dealing with, and to think about if there is a story that someone has, maybe you have, to tell that might embody what you're experiencing right now, or something that you might be seeing as your core teams are working, one of the stories that's arising in your context that really ties together everybody. I'm going to lay that down. Just put that in your brain. As you've heard story, we're going to go back into our real house meeting about tensions in community, tensions specifically in congregational communities that are trying to build housing. And I'm going to invite our next leader to bring us back into the house meeting one-to-ones.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Del Cruz, a companion for the First Unitarian Core Team. I use he, him pronouns. And now is a part of the house meeting where we will go into one-to-ones. In a few moments, you will be organized in groups of 2, and we'll have about 12 minutes to answer these questions in your conversations. And for our the East County folks and the other group of folks that are all in the room together, please find a partner and come back when you hear us. We'll call you. And when we return, we'll have a chance to harvest and hear together what you heard in your one-to-ones. And so here are the questions, which will also be in the chat. What did you hear from the animating story that resonates with you and the work your team is doing? And how is your own team meeting resistance from the outside or hitting barriers? I'll say that again. What do you hear from the animating story that resonates with you and the work your team is doing? And how is your own team meeting resistance from the outside or hitting barriers? All right. I have the privilege now of sending you out into your one-to-ones. So in a moment, you'll see a prompt on the screen. It should, zoom you out into the house meetings. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you experienced in your one-to-ones. What were you hearing and all of that? And so my first question is, what threads did you notice? What were you hearing and what were you feeling as you were hearing, having your conversations? What common threads did you notice as you were sharing your stories, and how are you feeling as you were doing them?
Chris, I heard a frustration about a change of leadership that may have kind of stagnated the core group, and in the difficulty in dealing with scarcity and conflict about, well, what should we do with our energy and our resources? So, and the other thing that I brought to the table is I feel that there's a time crunch, that it's hard for me to feel like I can settle in and take the necessary steps and have the necessary conversations.
And how did that make you feel as you were and what feelings do you like stir up in you as you think through those sorts of roadblocks?
For me, it's frustration, worry, concern, but then also with the person's story that I was hearing, I felt like, gosh, I would love to even be that far along in the process. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Yeah. others. And yeah, Nora.
I was talking to, like, I literally cannot remember the name for some reason. I apologize, but I was talking to them, and I brought up, an issue about how there are so many things in our community that the state of Oregon and the United States can, there's so many problems that we are putting money into, and that's helpful, but there are some things that we are putting money into that it doesn't, I'm not saying doesn't matter, but we could put that money into better resources, such as helping the houseless people, helping people who are going through a mental health crisis, helping LGBTQ plus youth. And I was able to connect with the person I was talking to over that, and that was just really nice to be able to connect with them and talk about an issue that we could both kind of relate to.
So I heard both like immense frustration that money is being wasted on things that could be helping folks, but
Yeah.
also you felt a sense of connection. Does that sound right?
Yeah, yes, it does.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you, Nora. Diana, I see in the chat you said you each have examples of resistance. Diana, would you be able to speak to that a little more? To unmute?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times in congregations, there are different views of how we meet obligations and service and mission. And sometimes it's frustrating for those who want to go in one direction, thinking that we're being pulled away and that won't come to fruition. I think what we also have to keep in mind that it's all kind of complicated, but I think sometimes the resistance from others means we're not moving ahead like we would like to address a real problem. That we keep talking it to death.
And how does that make you feel as you hit upon that and you keep talking it to death?
Frustration in a way, but I also have to remind myself that I don't have all the answers and that my way might not necessarily be the right way. So I'm trying to make sure that I keep open and keep focused on at the end we will do something positive, and have to have some kind of faith that will happen. And I think that's the charge, is to make sure whichever direction we wind up going, that it helps people maintain and have housing. So.
Thanks, Diana. I see Ellen's hand.
Hi, Nora. I wish I had your grace. I do not.
Oh. Thank you.
I really resonated with Story's tale because I'm a King of Kings Lutheran Church, and we are in the midst of a merger, whatever. There's very different terms that have been turned around, but anyway, King of Kings and Saint Stephen have been in a discernment process and joining with one another. And so there is the feeling that, okay, that's enough. We're doing this within our churches. And I feel very, very strongly that just doing internal stuff is not doing the work of the church. The work of the church is taking God's message out into the world. And if we're just worried about coffee hour and Bible study and all those wonderful things, we can't stop there. We have to do what needs to be done. And so that's where I'm coming from with this. So I have less patience and less grace on this matter. I try, but that's my feeling.
No,
Yeah,
should add something, because I was in the one-to-one with Ellen, and I think you all should know, you should hear what she said about King of Kings and the space there and the possibilities with the basement area as a possible form of some kind of housing. But that was kind of a vision, I felt, that you had, Ellen, about that. And with the possible merger, that means maybe one of those buildings will be available space, right? If you decide to meet at St. Stephen or at King of Kings,
Right.
the other building.
The biggest point of contention.
Yeah. Okay. That's a real discernment process, not just about how to keep doing what we've always been doing, but how to use that space that might become liberated, right, from that.
Thank you, John.
Well, I'm hearing from John and Ellen, like, yeah, there's this hope and there's this possibility. But then, listen, Ellen, I'm a pastor. I probably should have grace, but I am with you. That kind of over and over again, that specifically that scarcity thinking it's not only not what the mission of the church really should be, but it's also actually not helpful to only look inward. Like that's not practical or able to raise money here. Can we get just everyone back to the full screens off because I want to do a quick uh uh outside the spotlight. So look at everyone's screens. Raise your hands if you feel that sense of if you've ever felt in your community or congregation or body that sort of like, oh, we got to look back inward approach. Has anyone felt that at all? Yeah. Raise your hand if you've at least had one or two moments of that kind of Ellen and me energy of, oh, I'm really I am not feeling so graceful right now. Why is that? Like, what's so frustrating about that?
I think that when you see a need, you want to move toward resolving that need and not somebody said going over and over something and thinking of it over and over again. And at some point there needs to be action. At some point we need to actually meet the problem and do something about it. So I think that's where the frustration lies. And I'm not getting any younger. And Pastor asked me if I said don't have very much patience, and he said, "Did you ever have any patience?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, but now that I have more years behind me than I have in front of me, I certainly don't have very much patience." So
And I'm seeing in the chat, great people suffer in the meantime while we talk in circles. Diana, it keeps us from really living our faith. Story says, because it's not real. It's not reality that those things are separate, and that we think they are is a huge part of the problem.
Can I ask Chris to just say something more about what you just said? It is not that something about not having the energy.
From the chat, Chris, Story's comment.
Oh, so it's in the chat. It says, because it's not real, it's not reality that those things are separate, and that we think they are is a huge part of the problem.
Do you want me to explain it, Chris, what I meant? Or
sure, yep, go for it.
So what I'm getting at there is that, like, it's a false dichotomy anyway, this idea that these self-interests are different. It's separated because of scarcity. It thinks I only have enough to put here. But the reality is, which churches should be living into, is if my neighbor down the street does not have a house, my community at church is not healthy. It might feel healthy right now, but I'm not, because we're all connected. It's like with like a root system. Like if my neighbor is not getting water or sun, I'm not either. I just might not be feeling it as quickly. So it's a false reality that I think sometimes we do have to help people bridge to. Like, your self-interest is not separate from your neighbors. It's fake. It's something we've made up if we act like they are. Sorry, my timed light just went on.
Thank you.
And Des says in the chat, churches retreat inward because they think it'll save them, often financially, but it's looking outward and connecting to our larger community that makes our community stronger too. Does that resonate with anyone? Raise your hand if that resonates with you. I see not just hands, but I see John with 2 fists. Feeling lots of feelings right now. Is anyone else feeling lots of feelings right now? Yeah, it's Nor I see the thumbs going up. All right. Should we zoom back? Should we zoom out?
All right, friends, I want you to take a breath. We've been tracking a lot of conversation about frustration that you're feeling in your own places and with people that you love. Think about what happened in your one-to-ones that was different than what happened in the story that Story told with your receiving that. Give me a couple of reasons that you absolutely cannot skip one-to-ones in a house meeting. Go ahead and put them in the chat or pop up. I don't mind either one. And I am going to make that statement. You cannot skip one-to-ones in a house meeting. Why would I say that?
Because you can't make progress without that person being heard.
Thank you, Nancy. It takes all of those connections and stories. Thank you. Yeah, it is what people value most. That's where the relational piece happens, right? That takes it from consuming something to being a part of it, right, Diana? That's what I'm hearing in your comment. It gives you a little practice naming and telling your story, which is harder in a larger group. Anna, I think that's absolutely right. We get to practice that kind of connecting without the pressure. And a deeper sense of belonging, having common ground. Yeah. And look what happened when Chris harvested from that, right? That's what we call it when we zoom out again and we say, what happened inside those private or more private spaces? What did you notice when Chris started to draw people out? What happened? People got excited. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think also, Jules, I think also people started realizing that their situation wasn't unique, that everybody has the same challenges that they're trying to deal with. And so you don't feel like you're so alone.
Yeah. It's not just King of Kings.
Exactly.
It's not just First UMC. It's all of us are facing something and together we can figure out how to solve it because we have a lot of information.
I just wanted to say I really appreciated Diana White's comments about how you have to just trust the process. And I think we often, and I heard this voice, like we feel this sense of like we have to get to a solution immediately, but the process is so important to getting there and doing it well. And I think it's often hard to slow down enough to do that. And then somebody else said, I feel like I don't have enough time to get someplace, but I think we need to take that time. Even if we're learning a 9-month cycle, that doesn't mean we're all going to do this whole process in 9 months. It means we understand what that cycle looks like, and it takes what it takes sometimes.
Well, and I think what I've seen over the last 8 years of doing this is that it feels slow during that time, but doing it well speeds everything else up later, right? Because you've built trust and you can move at the speed of that trust instead of having to manage all of the conflict all the time. Yeah. Thanks so much, Mary Ann, for redirecting us back to Diana's comments. I want to bring up that one of the things that is real in a house meeting is a powerful one-to-one question. So I want you to think about, how do you choose a question? The question that we asked was what? How is your team meeting resistance from outside or hitting barriers? Or what did you hear in that story that resonates? Why did those two questions draw so much energy? That's not rhetorical. Why did that happen with those questions?
I think because everybody could relate to that question. Everybody had some reaction of like, yeah, I see evidence of this.
Yeah. So the question doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be super expressed, like very fancy ways. It's just, what is the question that's going to get people talking about the thing they have in common, the reason they're there? So when you all get real intimidated about writing a powerful question for your house meetings, let it go. Just ask the question that people will connect over related to the thing you invited them over, right? I want to say just a couple things before we move back into the house meeting, because we're still in it. Another benefit of these one-to-ones and of the harvest is that it draws up new stories so that you can go and have new one-to-ones. You all now know things from other spaces and now people's stories from other spaces that without having come together in this way, you would not have been able to find as easily. So now Ellen has some people she can talk to, right? John has some people to talk to. Chris has some people to talk to. And that could only happen if we made sure that out of those one-to-ones, we were bringing that conversation alive afterwards. Also, if people don't leave a house meeting mad, it probably wasn't a powerful enough story or question. House meetings are to agitate people to action, right? And we get there by being mad about something most often, or being moved, however that looks for you. So I just want you to think about that. If you make people mad in a house meeting, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. You got people worked up. Awesome. All right, we're zooming back out. I'm going to turn it over to Allison so we can go back into our house meeting.
Hi, I'm Allison. I use she, her pronouns. And we are nearing the end of our house meeting. And you might want to know what's going to come next for us. We are going to be having other house meetings like this across the community. So even more people can participate and be part of sharing what, obstacles they're running into in their processes. We also have a very important date coming up. March 10th is our Action Assembly in Portland, and we will gather all of us. It'll be more than 500 people from across the state, and we will use that time to put pressure on our elected officials and leaders to make sure that all the barriers that we are facing are deconstructed. You will see more information about that in the email that's coming out, so please keep your eye out for the email. And if you are interested in being part of the leadership team that is working on creating that event on March 10th, please reach out. We hope to see you there. This brings us to the very last portion of our evening. Now that the house meeting is wrapping up, I hope that you feel more connected and a little bit less alone. One of the things that we say in organizing is that anything worth doing is worth evaluating. So every time we gather people together in a house meeting like this, we want to make sure that we're using the time in a way that is valuable and enriching. And we'd like to learn from you what could have gone better and what was meaningful for you. So take a moment to pause and think about this gathering that we just had. The house meeting part, not the whole meeting. So not the parts where Jules jumped in and made us think about why we were doing it. The actual house meeting part when Jules wasn't talking, but when we were actually doing the house meeting. Think about that. In the chat, please share, was there something that you needed during the house meeting that you did not get? Was there something that you needed that you did not get? Okay, let's add the second question. What did you experience in this house meeting that you are excited to take back to your family or your core team or your congregation or your community? What are you excited to take back to others? Go ahead and write that in the chat. Debbie said that she wished that she had had more time for connecting in the house meeting. People are taking back renewed energy. taking back the idea that it's okay to get mad and telling people to get mad? Or at least bringing out the anger that's probably already there? What else are you going to take back? Sense of not feeling so alone, that one-to-ones are so useful. Yes, and we encourage using them in every single meeting. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you so much. If you have any more thoughts on what could have been improved, what you needed that you didn't get, or what you are taking away, please put that in the chat. And we thank you so much for participating in this house meeting, for sharing your stories, and we look forward to seeing you on March 10th.
Okay. The house meeting has thus ended. As we say, thanks be to God, right? So let's zoom back out permanently and talk about evaluation. So you just had a house meeting, and as Allison so clearly said, anything that's worth doing is worth evaluating. Tell me why. Why would we evaluate a house meeting as participants in one or as leaders in one?
To decide if it's comfortable.
Say more about that. Was that Nora?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nora, say more about comfort.
So I mean, I always find that I am comfortable with everybody, every meeting, and the land and housing coalition meetings. I don't know about other people, but like I said, I've always felt comfortable and like not having to be, stressed out about, if if I just woke up from a nap or, like it's just always been nice to be able to come into a meeting and express my opinions and have those valued by others. And that is really nice.
Thank you for that. So one of the reasons we evaluate is to make sure that we're attending to folks who are experiencing, who are impacted by, who are having lived experience of the things that we're working toward, and that folks feel welcome and belonging in our spaces. I'm going to push back on comfort, Nora. We don't always want people to feel comfortable because we want people to get tension, right? But we definitely want people to feel like they belong.
Like it's a safe space.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks. I appreciate that. Why else do we evaluate? To be able to reflect on your experience, to be conscious of the impact the space had on you. Thank you, Des. Yes. Did we meet our objectives? Absolutely, Beth. We said we were going to do a thing. Did we do it? Did we manage to pull it off? And yeah, Diana, I resonate, Diana, with always wanting to do better next time, right? Because in a house meeting season, in a listening season, you're not probably just going to have one house meeting. You're probably going to have more than one, and you're going to want to nail it down, right? Like over time, you're going to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And you can only do that with evaluation to make the next one even better. And the next one after that, ooh, that powerful question, we need to tweak it. Or, ooh, that story, we're going to work on the ending for that. Or, oh, the facilitator couldn't figure out her sound. Let's make that better next time, right? We're going to do all of the work to make the next one really good. What was meaningful and worthwhile? Are folks feeling invested? You're measuring leadership. You're measuring whether you're building leaders. What did we learn? Yeah, Marianne, what else are we learning?
I think it's important to do evaluation with everybody that attended, but I also think the people who have facilitated the house meeting need to also do their own evaluation, like where did we feel awkward or where did we not achieve what we were hoping to achieve? So I think it isn't just feedback from the group, but also you putting your heads together and saying, oh no, we need to change that because it didn't work the way we wanted it to.
So smart. So one thing that you all, I hope are doing in every meeting, after every meeting you're holding, we are going to do it. The whole facilitation team tonight does this every time we meet. We're going to hold back and we're going to do exactly what Marianne said, because we want to know where we can get better, right? So y'all do the same with whatever you plan. House meetings, core team meetings, evaluate. And it doesn't have to take very long. Just a couple of questions and a couple of moments to make sure that you got what you needed. All right. I'm going to move us into a different piece because I want us to have time as a whole community to debrief this entire experience. You just evaluated the house meeting. Let's talk about the experience of house meetings and your feeling about being able to pull one off, right? So what's helpful, what was unexpected? If you were going to catch one of your team members who couldn't come tonight up to speed, where do you feel unclear? What do you need? And I'm going to share some tools with you in a minute. So hopefully some of the tools questions will get cared for, but
I would like to be able to carry and communicate the purpose of what it is that we're going to be trying to accomplish the next gathering that we have.
so in your house meeting, you want to be able to do that well.
Yes, and if I'm sharing with another leader that wasn't here, I want to be able to share that.
Yes, great.
What are we aiming for?
Yeah, so I can just answer directly.
Please.
Yeah, because I'm sensing it's a direct question, Nancy. So there's a couple of things we're aiming for. One was, this was a real house meeting. The notes we were taking in the chat and the recording that we have is going to feed all of our work. We now have a lot of information and stories we didn't have woven together before. So one outcome was we had a house meeting and we learned some stuff. The second thing is we're going to have more conversations like this to help teams get unstuck. The third thing will happen is you all are invited, and yes, even encouraged strongly, to have some house meetings in your own places about topics that are showing up in those places so that you can move forward and get unstuck on your own as well, right? So one of the things that you might want to say to a colleague, a friend, a core team member who's not here is, let's start talking about, like, if we were to do some house meetings, what they would be about. Okay. Who do we need to listen to? Or who have we listened to that need to all be in the same room together? Yeah. Yeah. Good question. House meetings are a good doorway for folks who are uncertain about something. They're a safe place for them to learn about what is happening. They're also a really good place for folks who are uncomfortable with cold call one-to-ones. Like, why is this person wanting to talk to me about my housing pressures? It's kind of a softer landing. The other thing that is true about house meetings, friends, is that they are a wonderful place for folks who are experiencing the impact of the problem that you're seeing to not feel alone. So you can host house meetings with a mix of people, knowing that everybody there is getting something different out of it. But in the end, you have a larger group of leaders that understands the problem and understands what you're up to. So I'd encourage you to think about that. And I will say this, literally anyone can lead a house meeting. Literally anyone. Because you just write your script for you. Like, we're going to send you scripts. We're going to send you all the agendas. You're going to be able to facilitate because you're going to just make it work for where your place is. I'll say this while folks are still thinking about what would be helpful. We're going to send out after this meeting a sample house meeting agenda that you can make your own, scripts that you can make your own. You'll see like the full script from Levin Community's most recent listening campaign. And we had a dozen house meetings and use this script, and you can steal it and adapt it. Notes taking sheets so you can keep track of what you learned in your house meeting. All sorts of resources like that. So you don't have to generate those. You can just use what already exists and make it your own. What other questions or ahas are in the space because you were in this house meeting tonight? What do you need to know that you don't know? Or what do you know now that you didn't? Not to be afraid of anger. Ooh, Nancy, you're speaking my love language. Let's get it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's best to do like a series of house meetings that then lead to something? Like maybe you have then like we're gonna do, you tell your community like we're gonna do a series of house meetings, and then there's gonna be like a big large group meeting, or like do you sometimes just have house meetings that don't lead to anything in particular? Yeah, can you speak
I
to
think
that?
it is always best if you have something that you're able to turn people toward, even if that thing is not another event. It might be, I'm just going to make this up. Our church is about to vote on a merger, and we really also want to build housing. We need you all to show up at the church council meeting and talk about why you think we can do both. We just heard in this room that it's important to everybody here that we do both. Let's go make sure that everybody in leadership knows that, right? Like, you can create action even out of things that already exist. But I do think this is something I've seen communities do, and you're pointing at something that is a breakdown in the system if you don't have plans for action, where you just listen eternally and never take those stories somewhere. And that's a waste. It's a waste of stories. It's a waste of people's energy. So you do want to make, even if what you do, I've seen communities do this really well, even if the only thing you do is you have like a forum where you say, we had 12 house meetings and here's what we heard from the community, so that it's integrated and harvested and everybody gets to hear what happened. That's sufficient too, because sometimes what a community needs is to hear itself, right? So does that help a little bit, Allison? Depends on the where. Yeah. What else comes up for folks? Anything? Some folks ask me, how do I invite somebody to one of these? I'll tell you, it's very straightforward. You say to a person who trusts you or who you're building trust with, listen, there's a really important meeting coming up where I think you're going to want to hear what's said, and I think you're going to want to say some things. We're having a house meeting. Are you willing to come? I will pick you up. I will bring you there. I will take you out to dinner afterwards. Want to hear what you think about it. And will you come with me? The other way to invite somebody is to say, I'm going to a meeting and I need a friend to come with me. Right? That's a good turnout strategy, y'all. It's a good way to get people to do something. But you don't have to make it fancy. You don't have to explain a bunch. We're going to be talking about housing pressures, and I think you've got some things to say about this, right? Whatever the topic is. Any last words about that?
Well, there are a couple questions in chat, but also one quick just tip in the harvest section. What couldn't be demonstrated in the Zoom room is like the use of wall sheets, like writing, because I think the visual, as you like notice the threads, like as the stories come up, and the visual, and Jules was doing a good job of doing that in chat, but there's both practical recording purposes, but also power in folks seeing the same words over and over again, or folks you being able to visualize that. And so just throwing that out there. Like,
thanks, Chris. Yeah, the visual work in the background of tracking what's being said is super important. Beth asked, are there videos of house meetings for people to watch so their worries can be alleviated? Not usually, because house meetings have like some pretty vulnerable stories. I would not record a house meeting. And this is what your companions can help you with, and your organizers. So seek help, and your organizers and companions can help you create something that really works for where you are and gets those fears minimized. If I hope that helps a little bit, because that's why we're here, is to help you do this. And then how to get a congregation to shift from scarcity mindset to abundance mindset. Can a house meeting help with this? Yes. And it would be really interesting to have a conversation about what's the topic of the house meeting. How do we get to a place where the conversation isn't about abundance and scarcity, but when people come in with a scarcity mindset, they leave with an abundance mindset because of the conversation that happened, right? Oh, I learned that in fact, there's a bunch of people who are willing to work on this. What I thought was scarcity was actually me being isolated, right? So there's a way to come around those things that's like still gets it done, but you don't have to like go at it straight head on. All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Chelsea for next steps. Before I do that, I want to say to all of you, as you're thinking about this, as you're putting this into practice, and I hope you will, ask for help from your companions and organizers. we have some immensely experienced house meeting leaders in this space. Some folks have done dozens and dozens, and you don't have to do it alone. There's no reason you have to do it alone. You can if you want to, but you don't have to, okay? As a companion, is it better to teach the core team to lead their own house meetings or to show up and help lead? Show up and help lead, but in the background. Let the folks learn how to do the skill, right? Teach, share, walk with, but don't do for. Okay. All right, Chelsea, will you tell us what we're doing next?
So the next steps and assignments, we have no meeting in March online. Instead, we invite you and your people to the Mass Assembly on March 10th from 4 to 6 p.m. This will be an opportunity to feel our power together, to celebrate the stories of this year's organizing, and to be in person. Location is yet to be determined, but we'll be in the Portland metro area. Last year, we gathered over 400 people and started a campaign to move the power of land, people, and money across Oregon. Let's do it again this year. See you March 10th, and then we'll be back together online April 4th. For starting to think about house meetings in your context, start planning at least one house meeting with the folks you've had one-on-ones with so far this year. Also, last one, don't forget to keep working on land stories. Work with your companion if you get stuck. Thank you.
Thanks, Chelsea. We'll send all of this out to you all in the next couple of days, along with the video of tonight, so that you can rewatch if you need it or share it with your teams. We will not meet in March because we will all be at the assembly with our people ready to go. A place to call home is the theme. Let's make sure that everybody has a place to call home, right? This is what we're working on. All right, friends, you've done good work. Thank you for your stories, for your vulnerability, and for your organizing. You're changing your communities, and we are so, so thankful for all of the energy that you put into this. We'll see you on March 10th.